Four.
Let's think about that one.
Episode, episode four, again with myself and Angela, the beautiful Angela Doyle Stewart. We have just moved out of having great conversations on the topics of self love. We explored boundaries in our last one, and today we're moving into another very important and big topic, which is called red flags and red flags in relationships. Not every warning sign shouts, some whisper. Recognizing red flags early can save your heartache later. I love that. That's so true. Here are a few to look out for. And this is coming off of the beautiful post that we put up today on the Pink is Power podcast Instagram page, guys. If those of you out there have not started to follow us yet on Instagram, this is where you're going to find all of our posts and all of the information on upcoming interviews. So, signs to look out for: love bombing that quickly turn into control, dismissing your feelings instead of listening, crossing boundaries you've clearly set, making you feel guilty for needing space or independence, consistent lack of respect of your time, values, or goals. Red flags aren't about perfection, they're about patterns. If you find yourself excusing the same behavior again and again, it might be time to pause and reflect. And in this conversation, myself and Angela will dive into this a little bit more. Angela, darling, over to you on this very, very important topic. I know you spoke to this topic there recently enough when, and maybe you feel comfortable to share that with everyone. You spoke out in Brussels, that's correct? Brussels?
Yes, in the EU Parliament in Brussels.
The EU Parliament in Brussels. So I'll allow you to come in on that.
Part of what I like to do is to raise some awareness because in my situation, in my sister's situation, for those of you that might not know, and I don't want to ever assume that people know my story because not everyone does, but my little sister Lisa was killed almost 16 years ago. It'll be 16 years ago this month on the 20th of September. And this will be aired by then. But Lisa was in a relationship with someone for 4.5 years, someone that she loved, somebody that she wanted to marry, somebody that she trusted, somebody that she felt safe with. And when we look back, we too thought Lisa was safe with this person because, in reality, I am a very protective sibling, and particularly a big sister, and I would have been Lisa's older sister. And I was very protective of her. Unfortunately, 16 years ago, we didn't know enough and we didn't have enough information on coercive control and also on signs that a person might be abusive when they're, you see, it's easy to know if somebody's harming you when they're hitting you or if they're, you know, physically abusive. You can kind of name that, that's wrong. But with coercive control, I mean, it can be very sneaky and manipulative. And it can often mean the person that's being controlled is the last to actually know they're being controlled, and they might make excuses for that person because they love them. And, there might be many reasons why they're unaware. And it's not a lack of intelligence or a lack of understanding or compassion. I mean, usually these people that are being controlled are often, if they're like my sister, hugely compassionate, hugely intelligent, and really giving people, so giving in their lives. And Lisa was very, very giving and very kind. It was more so in the last few months, I started to become aware that something wasn't right. And I kept trying to figure out what that was. I never thought my sister was in danger. I never thought that anything like that. I mean, that didn't cross my mind. But what crossed my mind was I was obviously seeing less of my sister. We were very, very close. So we did so many things together. We were like best friends as well. So not just sisters. I mean, we'd live together, we'd holiday together, we did so much together that our relationship was just so strong that I noticed when I was not getting the same connection, that it was very when I'd call, it was like, oh, I'd ask to meet up. And Lisa used to love meeting up with me and we'd make loads of plans. And it became, no, I can't. And I'm like, why can't you? No. And then when she would offer to meet up, she'd say he wants to come too. And I couldn't understand why he would want to come on a girl's day out or a girl's trip to, the salon or, just lunch. It didn't make sense to me that he always wanted to be around. So that was an issue. But also family gatherings when Lisa started to make excuses. Initially we felt, and I said to my siblings, it's not Lisa, that's him. There's something there. If she's not coming, like the last one would have been where he was watching a soccer match and Lisa bought him the car, but she herself didn't know how to drive. That was something she planned on doing. She was only 24 at the time when she was killed. So she had bought him the car and got him insured, got him all of that, paid for everything because she was the one working. He wasn't, he had lost his job. And as a result of that, she was paying for everything. But she said, I can't come because he's watching a soccer match and he doesn't want to leave to drive me. And now this drive was a 5 minute, maybe 6 minute drive, but he wasn't willing to get up. The soccer match to him was much more important than a family member's birthday party. This is a child's birthday party. And Lisa being such, loved children and, especially her nephews and nieces, she would want to have been there, but he was making it difficult, I felt. And somebody in the family said, "Oh, look, just leave them." And I said, "No." I said, "That's him. That is him. I know that's him." And I said to my brother, "I don't know where that house is. Can you go get Lisa and bring her here?" And I texted her. I said, "Michael's going to go get you now. So if you can be ready to go, and he'll drop you back later." And she came. And I remember thinking, he won't like that. I remember thinking that'll sicken him because he wanted her there with him. And that was the few months before. Um, there was just kind of that separation. And I thought I'd done something wrong. And I kept kind of thinking, God, did I do something wrong? And that's what happens to family members because the separation is created to make you feel like, by someone that's controlling. What they're doing is they're separating you from your loved ones. They're separating from the people that can be your support and will be your support. And he was doing that, but I wasn't realizing as much because I thought, was it me? Did I do something wrong? And I know I've spoken about being a bossy big sister before, because big sisters can be a little bit bossy, and mine bossed me around as well. But I thought maybe it was that. And I remember writing Lisa a letter apologizing for being a bossy big sister and, hoping we could be best friends again, all because of what he was doing. It was because of him I felt I had done something wrong. But little did I know he was creating obstacles at all times. When Lisa's workmate said afterwards that he would just show up, like she stopped going to social events, which we learned afterwards. So he would show up. She was out with her girlfriends in a pub, which would have been rare, but he would show up. She went to a friend's house. The friend had just had a baby. Lisa bought the friend a gift for the baby. They're upstairs in the bedroom, this girl's private bedroom, and she's talking to her. Her partner is downstairs, this girl, and so is your man. He's downstairs as well. And when they turn around, he's sitting on the bed. And she turned around and this is what she told us afterwards. We didn't know this until afterwards. Jesus, you could be or like a stalker, something like that. Like the way you came in here, we didn't even hear you come in until they turned around. He didn't make his presence known. He was sitting there. They're in conversation. They didn't realize he's sitting on her bed in this woman's private bedroom. He followed her up. And then Lisa's manager at the time said to me afterwards, at the funeral, he said, I thought it was strange that he would be outside more than an hour before Lisa would finish her shift. It was a walking distance where they lived at that time. And he thought it was strange that he would be outside. He'd position himself in, Lisa worked in the Argos shop, and you could see in and you could see out easily to some of the cars outside. And he would position himself right outside the shop an hour before she would finish her shift, and he would be looking in at her. And he asked Lisa, obviously, this is all stuff you learn afterwards. He said it to Lisa, he said, do you've really far to go that your boyfriend turns up so early every evening? He's here an hour before you finish. And she said, no, sure, we're only up the road. He just likes to be on time. Lisa would kind of play it down like that. But really, like he was an hour, more than an hour sitting outside. And I suppose when you look at that, even in itself, that kind of need. One of the girls had driven her home one day, and she told me, this is also afterwards, that the car hadn't stopped and it was slowing down. And Lisa said, "You can let me out here." And she said, "But that's not the house. I let you out at your house," which was further up the road. And she said, "No, you can let me out here." And she said she hadn't even stopped the car. Lisa had the door open and was getting out. That she was so eager and anxious to get out of that car. This was a girl that was driving her home, not a boy, nothing like that. So I suppose, it's like Lisa never Lisa never said anything. Lisa never said to me anything about it being an issue until the week before, when she said to me, when I went up and I met her, I wasn't sure if she was going to be there because my brother said if the car wasn't there, she may not be there, but she was. And when I went inside, and she was there, with delighted. We spent the day together, and she said to me when we left, when we're on our way back, I hope he's here, because I don't have any keys. So he'd taken the keys with him, even though he had the car, and she was supposed to be tied to the house, is what I kind of got from that. If she went outside, that was it. She was out until he got home. Um, she never really had money. Stuff like that. Everything was kind of gone into him. And then at a family event, they'd only arrived, it was a christening, and she sat down beside me. And within 20 minutes, she said, "I have to go." And I said, "Where are you going?" And she said, "I have to go home to his house because he's not comfortable in the clothes he's wearing." So he's wearing like a jeans and a shirt, for the christening. And I said, "What's wrong with him?" As in, what's wrong with what he's wearing? And she said, "Oh, he just wants to get into something more comfortable." And I said, "Well, let him go. He can go. You're not going." I said, "I haven't seen my sister in so long." I said, "It feels like forever when I get to see you these days." And I turned around to him and I said, "Yeah, she's saying, but you're welcome to go. It's fine." And then he said, "No, no, no, I'll stay then." So that was it. He wanted to get her away from us. And that was his way, looking for excuses. I'm uncomfortable, so you need to come with me, even though it was a family gathering that for her family, for Lisa's family. Um, and he just wanted to take her out of it. And I kind of said to him, "If you're not really comfortable, because I got, even then, I was considerate. I was thinking maybe, he's just not comfortable in large gatherings. I know how that can be at times." And I said, "You're welcome to go. I'm not drinking. I'll drop Lisa back later. There's no problem. Work away if that's what you're worried about." And he just looked at me. And I remember thinking there was something behind that look, but I wasn't sure. And he said, "I'm staying." And I said, "Okay, you can stay." But he said nothing. He sat there, said nothing all night. And like, I get quiet people, I get introvert people, and I have every respect for that because I can be like that myself. There was something about his presence when I look back. Um, it wasn't introverted. It wasn't someone that was shy. He was quite ignorant at many a times. So it was like you come out with really rude things. When my husband first met him, and it was something I wrote about in my book. The first thing he said to Stephen was, yeah, Stephen said, "Oh, the Doyle girls are lovely, aren't they?" About me. And he really taught the world of Lisa. And he turned around to my husband and said, "Yeah, the Doyle girls are lovely, all right." And he pointed at his chest, and he said, "They've great boobs." Um, and Stephen was disgusted because he kind of thought to himself, he said afterwards, he said, "Do you know, he's gone out with Lisa a while now." And that was his, response to me about you and Lisa, about, like you're an object or something. So he didn't know what way to take him. And then, he had very little ability to make conversation. I found it was strange. I tried to get out of him when he proposed to Lisa. I remember having to ask him why. Not because Lisa isn't somebody you would want to propose to, or that he was lucky to have Lisa. He was lucky to get to propose to Lisa. But it was like I was trying to figure him out. I couldn't figure him out. And I said it to him, and the way he said, "Because I love her." But it was real, how he said it was like how a 10-year-old might say, kind of the way a child might say it. It was like he was rehearsing it, like he had to practice it. So there was like, there was something, the lacking of depth there. But little did I know that all the time, sure, even during that time, he was harboring murderous thoughts and tendencies. Like he was thinking all that time he had
Mm,
urges to kill people. And, he was probably, when I think about it now, on many occasions having an urge to kill me. And I don't say that lightly. When I
mm,
look back now, I've been around him and how he was around me and how he would even look at me. I can now think, okay, the likelihood is that he was thinking of those when he was thinking of me as well, how he would want to hurt and harm me, but yeah, so I think as a result of that, and I have been, I suppose, for the last number of years, speaking about coercive control and signs. And, it's very difficult for the families to see it. And it's very difficult for the person to see it. And I would say to people, don't beat yourself up over it, and don't, give yourself a hard time if you're coming out of it. It's very hard to see it. And, the research would show it's usually the families and the person that's being controlled the last to know. Um, and it's very hard to know what's going on in another person's life when you live such independent lives now. When people are in different circles, it was only where I would be very like, I want to see my sister, I want to see my sister. And my life was quite busy as well, but I still wanted to see her. And it was like, that's where I could see, I'm not really seeing her. Why am I not really seeing her? And I suppose that's what I always say to people now. If someone in your life, you would have seen a lot of, and they would have spent a lot of time with you and they would have been picking up the phone, ringing you, and that stops, I would question that. I would ask, why is that happening? Why am I not hearing from that person? And it doesn't have to be a sister. It can be a friend. It can be somebody that you've noticed something. And it could be around a relationship. They were a few years into the relationship before that happened. So it didn't happen immediately. And that's the other thing. They were 4.5 years together. It really was only the last year that I started to notice things. And it was only in the last year that things started to change. So the first few years, that wasn't very prevalent. I mean, he would have went on holidays with his friends. Lisa would have went on mine. There wasn't, it wasn't immediate. So sometimes you can go into a relationship and then start off very healthy. Well, maybe not very healthy, I don't know, but loving in some way that you don't see things or the person's not picking up. And it can be a few years into that and things start to change. So it's not always the start of a relationship. And that's something that I've learned. And
mm,
it doesn't always lead to murder as well. And I think that's kind of there's relationships that are controlling, but there are the high risk relationships. That's the problem. I mean, if somebody's in a very controlling relationship and that person's trying to get away, it's in that separation is where it can be. That's where the danger can happen, and that's where it's the most dangerous when a person is trying to leave a controlling relationship, and in their home. In Lisa's situation, Lisa wasn't trying to leave. Lisa was getting married. Lisa was starting a family. So in this situation, you're dealing with somebody that was harboring murderous thoughts and tendencies. So along with being controlling, it was also somebody that just wanted to kill somebody, and it didn't necessarily mean Lisa. And now, as a result of that, he is up for parole and he could be released. So,
yeah, like number one, I mean, this is such a huge, very important story you've just shared, and a very precious story to you because it's your sister. So, I mean, firstly, thank you for being willing to share this with, the listeners. You didn't have to because it's very sacred, and I know you've written a book about it, and I know you've spoken about it, and you do use, what's very painful memory to inform and educate. And you've done incredible work with this. You've worked with changing, the policies here in Ireland, which I'd like you to talk about in a moment. But I would love to ask one question to you. For somebody who is in this space right now and who is in a relationship and it is coercive control, you were absolutely accurate in your articulation when you said sometimes a person don't even recognize when they're in that space and this is happening to them. So for somebody who can identify in the things that you named that went on for your sister, I would love for them to hear, if you feel okay in yourself emotionally, to share the impact this has had on you as family. Because I think if somebody could hear that, it might help them to understand the wider community, how the wider community is also affected by the situation they're in as well. How has this affected you all as family, as a family,
yeah,
your sister's loss?
And before I kind of talk to that, I will say something when as you mentioned there as well, how people might not know they're in it, and they might make excuses for it. And I don't mean that in a like, I don't mean that lightly, and I don't mean to take from a person when I say excuses, because
Yeah.
when you love somebody or you believe that you're in a loving relationship, you will make excuses. You will find a way to justify behavior, and you'll also think you're going mad at times yourself because an abuser will make you feel that way. What I would say, first of all, if you're listening to this now, and just from the research I have done and the people I've listened to over the last number of years, just in and around control and relationships, what I've learned is for the person who might be listening now, or somebody that that you suspect, maybe pass this on to them, and suggest it in a kind of gentle way, not in a way that you need to listen to this. We should never make a person feel bad because of their circumstances or their situation. Nobody decides to end up in a relationship that's going to control them. Nobody goes there willingly. It can happen to anybody. But what I would say is, if you're sitting there and something in a relationship for you makes you jumpy, I say, when the person is coming home, and this can be any gender. I know we mainly speak to women because that's the essence of what we do. And I would mainly speak to women because it was my sister that was killed. But what I would say is, if you're jumpy, a person's coming in the door, and instead of feeling like a bit of joy and a bit of happiness welcoming that person home, and all of a sudden you're checking yourself and you're nervous and your anxiety starts to go up, and you don't know why, because they've done nothing, right? They're just coming in the door, they're saying nothing, or even their name pops up, and even that message from the person you love should feel like a love, right? And they're saying something nice, but yet you're feeling a bit anxious. There's a reason for that. There's a reason your body's feeling unsettled, because it doesn't feel safe fully. And sometimes our body is speaking to us before our minds will register what that is. And we can block things out easily, but the body, as Karen will talk more on, as well, as it does hold the score. It holds that trauma. It holds that part of ourselves that sometimes we're not able to listen to, or we might not be ready to. So it's about kind of saying to yourself, if you're in a relationship and they're walking on eggshells, and it's like, but they don't hit me. They're not hitting me. And they're saying they love me, and they're doing this and they're saying this because they love me. But it doesn't feel very loving, and it doesn't feel very supportive. When you weigh it all up and you look at the bigger picture, if you were being told you're not going out with the girls or the boys, or and if you are, and you're being bombarded 24/7 when you do, and you're made to feel guilty about it. And don't get me wrong, some people have a little bit of jealousies and insecurities. That doesn't mean that they're bad people and that they're trying to harm you or hurt you or anything like that. But if this is constant and you don't have much of a life outside of that relationship, I'd be looking at that too. But in terms of the impact, I mean, Karen, I haven't spoken about it in terms of the parole board, but I'll be this, because this is our podcast. So this is the first and really the main space I will talk about it. I'm not going to talk about in other media outlets, and in case anybody's listening now, to that, I won't be, and I will not be discussing it in other media outlets, but I'll discuss it here because it's my words. And as we sat in that room with the parole board a few weeks ago, um even to try and describe the past 16 years of our lives, and the life and the impact that this has had on us, to try, and these very compassionate people that sat in front of us. I mean, they were so lovely and so kind. And I cannot say enough about the people that sat in front of us from the parole board. They were hugely empathetic, and we felt very supported there. But I will say, trying to convey to other human beings that you've just met for the first time, I'm trying to, because that they're trying to hear your story. And at the same time, then they have to go and hear, his story, his side, so he gets to talk, but also he gets to hear our side, but we don't get to hear any of that. So everything that was said that day, and I did say that on the day, I said, because we've done a lot in SAVE, around the activism around the parole system. And part of that was the ability to be able to sit in front of this board. And that was as a result of the work we have done, along with other governing bodies. But sitting there and being reminded that Ger O'Hara is going to get to hear what I have to say. He is going to read what I have said But when he goes in and he talks, I don't get to. And the only way we would get to hear anything that he has to say, whether he is remorseful, whether there's anything, is if we did restorative justice, which would mean that me and my family would have to sit in a room with him and with a mediator and hear firsthand from him what that was like for him and why he might have done it. But I don't believe he's ever had an answer to it unless that's changed now, because that is influential in somebody getting parole. I think they to be able to explain themselves why they did something, but he didn't have an explanation, only that he had urges to kill and wanted to do that. But we were told that so he will read everything that we've said in that room as we, I suppose, bared our souls. He gets to sit back in his cell with his Xbox and with all his other comforts and his psychologist that I pay for, really, technically, as someone that pays taxes. And yet I have to pay for my therapist. I suppose that costs me a fortune. But as he's sitting there, he's got the reading of the pain and suffering that I have. Now, if this was someone that I believed was remorseful or someone that was capable of remorse, I would say something. But I do believe he will get a great pleasure out of my pain. And I believe that that will be a great enjoyment for him. He might argue different than that, but I don't care what he has to say. But I do care that we don't get that option if we wanted it. But that's something I will be exploring further around my own activism, because I do think we should be, if it's one, why, the system, it's definitely becoming more victim focused and, definitely in terms of what it had been, but it's improvement. And that was an improvement, being able to sit in front of the board, but trying to detail the impact. I think if you go through that impact, it's nearly impossible, because I think if I were to really go through the actual level of impact, if I were to really sit with the impact of Lisa's murder, I don't know how I would actually get through life. And I think in a weird way, our brains protect us and only allow us to deal with so much at any given time. So there'll be days where it'll hit me all of a sudden that my sister has been murdered, and it'll hit me even when I'm looking at her picture. It's like at times my brain will not go there; it will not accept it, and then other times it'll hit me, and I used to run from it, and now I lean into it and I allow it, and it is very, very difficult. It'll take me to my knees. It will mean that, I'm devastated. I don't even think that's the right word. I think it's impossible to feel all the feelings around it because it's so devastating um, and surreal at times still. And that's what we were trying to explain to the board, just as we are coming into a situation where we're finding our way. When people say to me, "Oh God, you lead such a great life," and I do have a great life, and and as I sat there in that room, Karen, I wondered what my life would have been had none of this had happened. I wondered who the person I would have been, and that's what I spoke to. I spoke about, and I'll share this here, some of what I spoke about in that room, and one of that was I wondered, in 16 years ago, I had such a different personality. I was such an open book. I was the type of person that if I met you, I would want to hug you and I would want to hold you and I wanted to be your best friend in the whole entire world. And my nickname was Smiley growing up. I mean, everyone in my town, that was my nickname, Smiley. And that's what people called me. They're Smiley. And that was who I was right up until Lisa was killed. I was that person. I remember coming down from Dublin once before I had kids, before I met Stephen, before Lisa. And I was living in Kilkenny with a few of my friends. And there was this group that I met on the bus, and they were going down, but they didn't know where they were going to stay. I didn't even drink then. I wasn't even going out. And they said they were going out for the night. And I said, okay, this is my address. This is my phone number. You come and you can stay with me afterwards, which is like nuts as well in another way. But I knew I had my flatmates. And when I get home and I told them, they were like, there you go again, taking in more strays. I just trust. And they arrived that night. Angela said we could stay, and I had the blow up beds ready for them. Strangers made them breakfast in the morning, sent them on their way. My heart was so open and accepting of everybody, and I had no fear. There was nothing. Probably needed a bit of fear because at times could have done with a bit maybe, but ultimately I was this open person. And I had so much ambition and I wanted to do everything in the world and be everything. And as I looked at the picture of Lisa that I brought into that room, because Lisa was such a champion, she was my biggest champion. And I'm looking at her and I wondered, where would I have ended up? What would I have done with my life? Who would I be now if Lisa hadn't been killed? And who would have people benefited from? What kind of person I had such an open heart. I loved around people. I loved being in service. I loved helping people. I would do anything for anybody. And then I was looking at Lisa in that picture and I remember that day. And then I remember everything afterwards and how slowly but surely I shut down and I closed every door and every wall built up around me and nobody could get in. And it's only now, going on 16 years, that I am finding that old part of myself, that part of Angela has come back, that, the walls are fully down. I'm emerging again and I'm finding, that old spirit, that trust in other people again, all of those parts of myself that I feel are alive and well and more trusting. I get there's things in the world, especially now, and there's things that are not so trusting, but I feel really open. I'm not looking over my shoulder as much. I started to purposely not look over my shoulder because that's a natural instinct for me, even in the daytime, because of him. And I've stopped myself doing that. I've said to myself, you need to try and feel safe, you need to just walk and just, I love going for walks. Don't keep looking over your shoulders every few seconds. So I'm trying to train myself to do that. I'm trying to make all those changes that people don't know that I live with. I keep my normality around my kids so that they are not impacted by my stuff. I go to therapy, as you know. Therapy is the best thing. And I would say to people, go to therapy, not because I'm now after qualifying. I mean, I just mean for yourself. I mean, the gift that gives. But I do think there should be more measures in place for people like me and free therapy for life, like they do in Australia and a number of other places. But that's another conversation another day. But ultimately, the impact, I will never know the scale of that impact because I lost a part of myself that day. Um, a part of me died, and that's what I wondered about that day in that room. Who was she? Who was the Angela that died that day with Lisa? Who was that part of my soul that fractured? Um, that the light went out, and only this is why people say to me, "Oh, you have such a loving relationship." When I talk about red flags and everything else, I mean, so I felt guilty for having the relationship I had with Stephen at first because Lisa didn't have the same. And I felt guilty when Stephen proposed to me that somebody, because Lisa had been proposed to, but somebody that loved me, I felt guilt, huge guilt about celebrating those things because of Ger O'Hara, because of what he did, because Lisa didn't have the same, that she deserves that and more. So I felt huge sadness and guilt. But because of the love I had with Stephen, because Stephen loved me so much, because I was so in love with him, my heart didn't fully close. And I think that was the ultimate thing, the savior for me. And I always say, even like none of us know where our relationships go. None of us know, I would like to say I will spend my life with Stephen, and he would say the same about me. But life has also shown me that shit happens in life. And, I don't want to say, I don't want people to think, oh my God, I'm perfect and I have everything in terms of my relationship. No one's perfect. Nothing's perfect. But I have someone that would move mountains for me and me for him. And it's because of that love, my heart wouldn't close. It's like Stephen came into my life only a few years before. And when I felt the guilt I felt for him as well, having to be with me to go through that. But he never felt it and he never even thought it. And his love for me is what the only reason I didn't shut down. And I think I didn't harden. And I think I went the opposite way. And because of that love and happiness he kept bringing into my life and the joy that we had because of our relationship, it kept my heart open. And then I got pregnant with our firstborn and all of that. Found out on my birthday, didn't even realize it was my birthday. Felt like, it was strange. And then that was the best gift, and that's another story. But it was the love of him that kept me sustained and got me through so much because I felt like I have to keep moving forward. I was never suicidal. I was never thinking I'm going to end anything. I was never at that stage. Um, but I remember thinking, I can't believe this is my life. I cannot believe that I now have to live with this for the rest of my life. And I never imagined that that would be my existence. And that was the hard part, not knowing that how I was going to get through it, not knowing if I would ever be okay. And it's only through therapy and through having such support around me and such love and being a mother. Had I, not, I don't know. I mean, without my kids, and that's why, I worry sometimes about them, but I can't let that in. I refuse to let what he did dictate the rest of my life. And I realize I have the control there. I cannot control him. I cannot change. So whatever that parole bill or parole board decide, I realized in that moment the reality is Ireland's very small and he's going to be free one way or the other. If it's not this time, it'll be just kicking the can that bit further down the road. But every time it's kicked a little bit further, the stronger we become. So there is that. But it's also the realization that this is somebody that I believe is a threat. But it's not up to me to control that threat. We have people that do their job, and I trust in them. I trust in yeah, the Gardaí, I trust in the system. I have to, because I have to believe that they're going to do their job to protect somebody else from the fate that, we've been handed, and that other people don't suffer. But I will continue with my advocacy work. But I also realize I kind of have to live my life too. Um, and I can't control him. And one day, I suppose, he will have to face Lisa. I mean, I believe, where none of us are getting out alive. So I don't know. And I don't really care about him and I don't want to. Um, so I just know that the harm it's done to us, and I can't speak for my siblings. They spoke that day. And it was really funny. It wasn't funny, but like I was thinking of all the interviews I've given, and they were so much more together and kept together in that room. I found it so difficult. And it was interesting. I didn't realize how much it would impact me, having to sit there and really talk about the depths of that, the depths of it, for years, like what other people, might not bother them. I know now, unfortunately, more and more people are looking over their shoulders, but like stuff like that, you know, it's not easy. But yeah, I think the board, they heard us and what we had to say, and the next stage we'll find out in a few months if he will be released or not. So I don't know. Mm.
I'm sitting here like, and I'm imagining if me and you were in a room right now and our listeners were present in that room with you, I don't want to ask, I don't want to fill what you've just shared with like questions. I just want to thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, honey.
Thank you for gifting to everyone such profound, and it is profound because it's language that cannot be, explained and expressed theoretically. You're sharing something that only those who are in it, gone through it, who know of it, who can identify with it, and you're given a voice to the voiceless for those who don't know how to voice it for themselves. And I'm moved by that. I'm moved by your bravery to be able to do what you're doing and to represent your sister in this incredible way. And I know she is so proud, like so proud of you. Of course she is, you know. So it would feel emotionally inappropriate to make this about an interview. Me and everyone actually want to thank you for who you are, for what you're doing, and for being able to share this in the way that you've shared it, because you've described the character of a person like in such a clear, crystal clear. You've crystallized this in such a way, Angela, like it cannot not be not understood. And that's the truth. And so if there's a gap in understanding, you've really, really walked and filled that gap right now with this crystallization of how you've described the story and the behavior and the noticing of what was going on around your sister and that droplet of realizations and, all of it. And really that part around recognizing that your pain may be experienced in a sensationalized way. I mean, absolutely. I can get that. I could get that. We're all, we're all hoping, I'm hoping for an outcome for you that allows you more time. As you said, with each time, we all get stronger. You know,
Yeah.
I think what hit me as well was hearing you having to sit with your siblings and hear them share that intimate part of themselves as well, and to be emotionally impacted by that. That's such an intimacy. It's
Yeah.
emotional, but it's healing, and there's this relatability of this is my bloodline, this is my family. I have
Yeah.
this with them. I love them so much and I have this with them. So it's inappropriate, and let's say it again, to go in this in an interview way. It's just, it feels right just to thank you for using, this podcast to share what you shared. Thank you for giving us
Oh,
that.
well, thanks for listening. Yeah, and I think that's the part, isn't it? Family are so important, and that connection with your loved ones. And when it starts to become severed, that's when you start to notice something, but you don't know. And somebody did say to me, I'd given an interview before on the radio, and somebody said that they'd left a relationship after listening to some of what I'd said and less of what I've said here. Like I've said a lot more here. And she came up to me, she told me, and we hugged each other. I had no idea what that person had been going through. I didn't have a clue. And I just, I thought it was incredible that she was able to, see for herself that it wasn't the right situation. She felt that she wouldn't have made it out had she stayed there. And I would say, if you're any way in doubt and you can get out, do so safely and do it with the right means. There's a lot more training now with Gardaí and services and women's refuges and so on. I would absolutely seek support from the people that know what they're talking about. If you're in a relationship that's unsafe, don't do it on your own, and that's the only thing I would say. Get help and get support. And don't be embarrassed or ashamed. So many people don't tell people stuff because they feel like they've done something wrong. There's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of or nothing to be embarrassed about. It's all about your safety. Um, you know, I would have loved if, we had known. I would have loved if, we could have saved Lisa. But, that's too late for us now. I mean, when he gets out, he's going to be young. He can have a family. He can have a partner. He can have a life. He can have all the things that Lisa cannot have and desperately wanted. And that's the system, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that other people have to suffer. And no one, no fucking person is worth your joy or your happiness. Say to people, fucking stay in a relationship to be miserable for what? Somebody else's needs? For somebody else to dim your light to make you feel less? If you are not being celebrated and loved and adored and really held up, and I don't mean every day because we're all getting a bit tired, long relationships doesn't mean that we're all recognized every day. But overall, if you're not going to bed tonight or with somebody and you're not lying beside that person and feeling grateful and thankful, but instead you're feeling fear and discontent and uncertainty, I would say look at ways to get out and get out safely.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And I'm going to extract that line that for me held medicine and power in it as a way to close us for today. For our listeners, is if you're anyway in doubt, please get out. Yeah. If you're anyway in doubt, please get out. Thank you again. Thank you, Angela. And thank you, everyone who is always willing to sit into these podcast spaces with us as we just, as you can hear, it's just us being sincere and real in our conversations. And thank you to those who are drawn to that energy of real and wanting to be part of this intimate conversations. Thank you, listeners. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And we will come back together again in another powerful, magical, wonderful, loving episode on Pink is Power.
Yay.